you Мы в эфире.
Добрый день, дорогие друзья! Мы рады вас приветствовать на площадке музейного гида в рамках фестиваля Интермузей. И сегодня мы будем говорить, сейчас мы будем говорить о цифровой открытости и медиаграмотности в сфере культуры. Конечно, важно понимать, что наш сегодняшний круглый стол и наша сегодняшняя дискуссия, она продолжит тот ряд, который в рамках Интермузея, начиная со вчерашнего дня, тот ряд разговоров, который ведется. И вот вчера уже на такой большой панельной дискуссии о том, что, собственно, произошло с IT-сферой в музеях в ситуации, как ковид изменил нашу жизнь, вот уже упоминалась открытость и как важнейшая ценность, которую мы сейчас и осознали еще больше в связи с новыми обстоятельствами. И, соответственно, вот сегодня, наверное, наша задача и разобраться, я говорю как человек, не прямо занимающийся этой сферой, а такой немножко свежий пирог с мороза, и разобраться в том, что такое, что мы называем цифровой открытостью, насколько музейная сфера открыта в этом отношении, и какие дальше нам проторивать пути. И еще очень важное направление, о котором сегодня говорилось очень подробно, это медиаграмотность в сфере культуры, особенно это сейчас мы можем об этом говорить уже с цифрами на руках, потому что сегодня был презентован очень подробно доклад, основанный на большом исследовании, который был проведен весной среди сотрудников музеев в России. И вот какова связь тоже между открытостью цифровой и грамотностью людей, и продвинутостью такой цифровой. Вот это тоже очень важно это понимать. Я представляю вам спикеров, которые сегодня на нашей дискуссии будут принимать участие. Вадим Баньков, директор департамента информационного и цифрового развития Министерства культуры России. Вадим, добрый день.
Hello, great to see you.
Да, и Вадим как раз будет говорить об открытых данных, которые Министерство культуры предоставляет. И, значит, дальше я с удовольствием представляю Ивана Бехтина, директора и учредителя автономной коммерческой организации «Информационная культура» из Москвы. Иван. Да, и я знаю, что вы занимаетесь не только, хотя у вас название «культура», я знаю, что вы занимаетесь не только культурными проектами, но вот тем интереснее ваш широкий взгляд и ваш опыт, что сейчас вы обратили свое внимание на культурные институции и данные. Владимир Определенов, Володя, добрый день.
Владимир Определенов, hello, dear colleagues, very happy to see and hear all of you.
Хорошо, мы сейчас вас просто поприветствуем вас, отпустим, и потом ждем вас, как только вы сможете присоединиться для дискуссии.
I'm not leaving you.
Прекрасно, да. Заместитель директора по цифровому развитию музея, Государственного музея изобразительного искусства имени Пушкина и руководитель совета по цифровому развитию при Президиуме и Ком России. Сергей Давыдов, доцент факультета коммуникации, медиа и дизайна Высшей школы экономики из Москвы. Сергей, добрый день. Да, вот я уже упомянула сегодня вашу прекрасную презентацию доклада результатов исследования, и надеюсь, что сегодня применительно к открытым данным какие-то, может быть, чуть более сокращенном варианте, какие-то выжимки из вашего доклада вы тоже нам представите. Алексей Тихонов, специалист по цифровым технологиям Государственного музейно-выставочного центра Росфото, Санкт-Петербург. Алексей, добрый день. И меня зовут Фёка Толстая, я заведующая отделом развития Государственного музея Льва Николаевича Толстого. Я попрошу начать Ивана. Я думаю, что ваш доклад, собственно, нас как-то с открытыми данными, их форматами, их вариантами, примерами и познакомит, правильно?
nicely introduce us to this topic. Yeah.
Но все-таки, чтобы осталось время на дискуссию.
But please leave some time for the discussion too.
15 минут
Yeah, sure.
по
You
нашему
have
регламенту, пожалуйста.
15 minutes. Well, could you please share my presentation? I will introduce myself once again. I'm from the NGO Digital Culture. This is a small NGO which emerged when open data and openness emerged in the discourse, in the governmental discourse. So we are trying to support that thread of thinking. Our priority is open data and the openness of state structures, open environment. That includes a lot of different aspects, including, for example, digital cultural heritage. And here I'm going to share international experience, initiatives that we know of, and some of the case studies from Russia. And I will also go through the terms and definitions. Please, the next slide. The next slide, please. So the first point I wanted to make is that museums, not only in Russia, but also all around the world, is foundation of the cultural heritage. Accessibility of the cultural heritage for people is part of their education, is part of their culture, and I think you know it much better than I do. So I just wanted to highlight, to emphasize that this is the foundation we're going to build on. Data, information, materials that museums create should be as open as possible. It's important for the civil society. And contemporary technologies enable this information to spread as widely as possible. The next slide, please. The first question is, what does it mean for the museums to be open? The first and quite evident point, well-described collections available online. It's almost every museum offers their collections digitized online, including metadata. The metadata is different for different types of cultural institutions. Somewhere it's part of the archive, somewhere it's part of the library, but it's a standard set of data that every cultural institution has to collect. The next step is catalogs readable for the machines, for the algorithms. Again, there is a dozen of international standards used in this area. Some of them are translated into Russian, so the catalogs can be made machine readable. These are the catalogs that can be read by computers from servers. So museums can store on their service, or not only museums, any cultural institution can store information on their service, which later can be used for other pieces of research, and the information, the data can be read and processed by machines. Next point is free license, Creative Commons. It's an extremely popular copyright. Again, licenses can be different. Some of the licenses allow all types of using data. Some of them work only for commercial usages. But there is at least some consensus of what would be the best way to go for certain types of material. The next point is open data. Open data is a kind of a combination of machine-readable catalogs and free licensing. So this data is not just integrated into the format, which is friendly for computers, but is also published in a manner available for any developer, for any algorithm. And finally, involving in filling and improving collections. This is an extremely important part of museum activities. Working and researching museum collections nowadays is not only the area of research for museum professionals. Now we see a lot of projects of civil collections, civil archiving, when broader public takes part in all of these activities. It's a huge trend that we witness all around the world. And it engages both the professional community and non-professionals, the broader public that is happy to help. And this trend is present in Russia too. The next slide, please. Just to elaborate on what I've been speaking about, I will offer you a case study. It's an initiative called Open Glam, Open Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. This is an initiative which is basically a standard which unites 4 types of institutions that have to preserve cultural heritage. The next slide, please. Open Glam is based on a few principles. This is the first of them: publish information about artifacts, metadata in the digital form in the public domain, in using suitable legal tools such as Creative Commons, zero waiver. It's one of the basic principles. It states that every object must have a corresponding description and a legal tool which will make it evident how this particular object can be used. And I will reiterate on that. This status should be given to every object, not just to all the objects published online. Because every collection has different objects that have a very different legal status. The next point: store digital copies of objects whose copyright has expired as public domain without creating new rights to them. Museums' relationship with it is quite complex, but actually it's all defined legally. Copyright, after its term expires, has to be relieved, and no new copyright can be applied. Many museums do the contrary. As soon as the copyright is over, museums are trying to impose new limitations. Here, the position is absolutely different. It is aiming for the broadest use possible, favoring Creative Commons. Normally, it engages also the national regulator as per the copyright for the objects and articles which are part of the heritage. The next slide, please. Once again, it's extremely important to clearly state your expectations and wishes regarding the free use of descriptions, collections, and parts of them published in the public domain for various purposes. Why does it matter? Nowadays, it's widely discussed how open should our data be and what does it mean to be open. If we take all the 4 different types of institutions, archives, museums, galleries, libraries, they have very different understandings of it, and there is no shared understanding right now. I will reiterate on that a bit later when I come to specific case studies, but for now, we have to make sure that those who work with data understand why it is necessary. Mostly, it is aimed at creating a big ecosystem, not losing attributed data, and enabling spreading the information as widely as possible. The next slide, please.
Use open machine-readable file formats for publicly available publications. I'm talking about open information because such machine-readable formats allow us to create very rapidly such information. If you need to create a mobile application, so you can organize different hackathons and you can publish in advance all the information, and you will be able to organize it and to develop an application very rapidly. You know, we are organizing 1, 2, or 3 hackathons each year, and we see that if we have open machine-readable file formats, we can organize it more rapidly. And it gives us a lot of opportunities. Next slide, please. And the last principle, it is the following principle: use new opportunities for audience engagement in the digital space. These are different tools, from creating special social networks focused, for example, on library employees, like in the Trove Australian project. They find different information, different files, they digitize these files, etc. These are also such projects as digitizing formats, when we digitize big collections. And also these projects allow the general public to say what is on the image and also when it was created, etc. There are different forms of public engagement which are open for museums and for museum employees. Next slide, please. And also the largest digital heritage projects are ecosystems. I would like to explain it in details. Next slide, please. The biggest project in the world is Europeana. I think that we all know about this project. It is a sort of a library, and there are a lot of information, also the information about Russia. And thanks for switching to the following slide. Yes, next slide, please. But not everyone knows that what is behind Europeana, because Europeana is not only a big project in the part that can be seen, but it is also a very big project inside itself. There are some 273 published and supervised databases. They are really supervised databases. There are 9 APIs. They are very detailed, very well described, and developers can use Europeana data. And also, if they represent a museum, they can just switch it on and publish some information in conformity to Europeana rules. There are some 50 million objects in this project, and on the basis of Europeana, there were at least 70 projects created. The calculation was made 6 months ago, and I think that during the COVID pandemic, there were no new projects, but there were already quite a lot of projects. And also the team of Europeana and a special ecosystem created 36 tools for programmers, for developers. And these tools can be used in different forms. Next slide, please. There's an example of Mani's Gammon. It is an interactive game, and this game was created on the basis of materials which one can find in Europeana. And the most important is that everything which was made for Mani's Gammon was created not by Europeana, but by another team on their own. Music scholarship online. So once again, it is about promoting of digital school of music scholarship, and it was also created on the basis of Europeana. It is a big library, and there are a huge number of materials, and Muso, united with Europeana, helped to create this project. Automated image analysis. This project was also created on the basis of Europeana platform, and developers are trying to detect what objects can be seen on images, people or architecture elements, animals, naked people, weather, sky, etc., etc. There are already algorithms developed for these, and programmers can help to tag or to write annotations for existing collections. Next slide, please. Historiana is an educational project also created on the basis of Europeana. It is a very well-structured educational project for EU students and school children. The main figures I would like to focus our attention on. I would like to say that Europeana is different from other projects created in this sphere. And we can see how they analyze the interest of their materials. You know, European culture, it is very important, and the promotion of European culture is very important for tourists and for the importance of European culture in the whole world. So they analyze the number of visits of a Europeana website, and the figure was 1.1 million for 2017. The second figure is about partnership projects with Europeana. No, I'm sorry, the second figure is about social networks, and the third figure, it is 12 million. These are the views, the number of views of European platform in their partnership projects. So they analyze not only the number of visits to their website, but also the number of views of their materials in their partners' projects. So if there was a project created on the basis of your material, for example, you need to analyze the number of views of this project too. Next slide, please. I will say a couple of words about Trove. It is a huge archive of newspaper materials and other similar types of materials. So they are tagging all the materials and they renew all the materials. I think that there are hundreds of libraries which are connected to Trove, and they publish their articles and other materials in Trove. It is a big social network for library employees and other people interested in this team. There are 580 million objects, 6.4 million photos and pictures, 300,000 texts and editions and tags and publications, and a lot of users. Well, this is the example of tagging. So first of all, we can identify what the text is, and afterwards the user can tag or add nodes to the text. Trove also has an API and developers can use it. Next slide, please. Trove Mosaic is one of the projects created on the basis of Trove platform, and it helps to search for a picture which you can use in your project or your presentation. Trove News Board is a project which is publishing news, and in general it is a very popular genre to publish some materials of 100 years ago, but these events can be related to our actual reality, our today's event. Query Peak is a tool for developers or for experts in analysis. So it is connected to the search of pictures. Next slide, please. I would like also to say a couple of words about another dimension of cultural heritage, and these are digital archives. For how long will you speak? Just a couple of minutes. Well, digital archives, I will be very fast because it is not really our profile and the profile of our discussion, because we are speaking about museums, but we also deal with archives. But we deal with archives of modern objects, not of objects of previous epochs. Next slide, please. An internet archive, archive.org, is a special archive, And you know, if anything is created, it will be saved in the Internet Archive. But the index of this archive is limited. Next slide, please. There are more than 30 public and private web archives in the world. Next slide, please. But there are also private archive initiatives like Archive Team. We can say that Archive Team is a team of archive hackers, and they try to save disappearing archives. For example, if an organization, if a company is not functioning anymore, so they delete their archives. But the archive team is trying to save all the archives, notwithstanding the fact that they can disappear. Next slide, please. We've created a special initiative in Russia, and we are now developing it. It is called National Digital Archive of Russia. So we would like to have everything which was created in digital format in this archive. Once again, we are not talking about previous eras. No, it is a digital archive of modern data. Next slide, please. It is my last slide, dear colleagues. So we are archiving disappearing online resources, and I'm talking only about online digital resources. We are dealing with archiving of all government websites and sites made with public funds. We are talking about digital cultural heritage, for example, some objects which were created during 1990s, and everything is done on the principle of open GLAM. So we make all the information open. It is open data, and we develop special tools. And we also have discussions with journalists and some interviews with them to understand what archives are needed for them. And once again, this initiative is developed on the basis of Open GLAM principle. And last slide.
Спасибо большое, Иван. Но это такой очень большой обзор, который хочется обсудить сейчас сразу. Но, может быть, мы поступим так и передадим слово Вадиму Ванькову, который расскажет об открытых данных, которые есть на Министерстве культуры. Хочется сразу, вот вчера Вадим похвастался, это приятно, что мне хочется это повторить, что по мнению Счетной палаты Министерство культуры является чуть ли не одним из самых открытых направлений. Понятно, хорошо. Но вот давайте, я предлагаю так, давайте попросим Вадима рассказать о том, что есть у Министерства культуры, и мы можем потом соотнести это с тем блестящим обзором, который Иван нам представил.
Пожалуйста. Okay, I haven't seen this PowerPoint. Let's see it together then. Yeah. Okay. This is a beautiful slide, but let's go to the next one straight away. Something that I always try to repeat is that there are very different perspectives on the industry structure from the point of view of an official and of a citizen. I think it is a key distinction we should keep in mind. If you take a look at this slide, you will see very clear distinction into national level, regional level, municipal level institutions. They are all subordinate to different bodies. And as for the municipal institutions, we have lots of them. And somewhere on the side, we have non-governmental cultural organizations, theaters, for example. They are not subordinate to the state. They fundraise themselves and they live by their own rules. The next slide, please. From a citizen's perspective, it doesn't really matter who the institutions belong to or who they are subordinate to. So I think that's the last thing a citizen is going to remember, that the Pushkin Museum is a federal institution, while the Alexander Pushkin Memorial Museum is a municipal one. When people make the decision of attending this or that exhibition, this is the last point they entertain. It doesn't really matter to them whether the institution is private or financed by the state or publicly funded. This is why it was important for us to create a completely egalitarian environment, something that any institution could benefit from. One of our focal points was to create a platform for the private institutions to be able to spread information about what they do. The next slide, please. As for our mission, we want to build an information chain from a cultural institution through different services, state-owned and private platforms, through open data, to the audience, to the people. As I've already said, our main mission is to share information, including the format of open data. Please, the next slide. So these are real-life cases of how the chain constructed with the help of the state it is something that both state-owned and private institutions can benefit from. Here we can see Yandex Afisha to the left, which is a private platform that provides information about upcoming events. And the other screenshot is from a state-owned platform. Of course, now we have to bear in mind the COVID-19 situation. On all the events announced are online. Offline events are cancelled, but hopefully we will soon return back to normal. We are planning to return to announcing offline events on the 1st of June. So this has nothing to do with our ideology. This is just a technical thing I wanted to highlight. So we create a platform for spreading the information. We are creating different portals, including regional portals, and we are building tools for disseminating information, because all information that is published on the resources on the platforms that we create, that we design, is based on the open data principle as part of our policy. We believe that we work with open data unless it is legally restricted, unless the dissemination of the data is legally restricted. So the information that we gather from different institutions in the sector is made available to any service, to any platform. For example, over the past year, we gathered 200,000 event announcements, and we spread this information for free, absolutely for free. So thus we provide information support for all cultural institutions. It also creates ground for further monetization of the services that cultural institutions provide. Some of the private platforms, like the one we showed in one of the previous slides, Yandex, they actually provide a virtual ticket office, so you can buy the ticket through them. They also have a review system. You can leave a review after you've visited this or that event. So basically what they do, they enrich the data they get from us. They make it more detailed. The next slide, please. This is a short breakdown of what we have in the Ministry of Culture. As I've told you before, we work with open data a priori, with all data, including the register of heritage sites, for example. We seek to create a digital space supported by the Ministry of Culture in Russia. It includes statistics. We support state services. We support the catalog of all the Russian museums that submit information about their collections. So this is a huge infrastructure which is equipped with our analytical system. So we gather all the information on one umbrella platform, and this information is helpful for the government to make decisions. For example, we are sharing the statistical information through this platform with the regional governments. Legally, the publication of data can have different status. Some of the statistical data can't be published completely openly, but we provide processed data on, for example, the statistics on the reports of the sector. So we provide the regional authorities with this processed data, with a summary of the data. We think it's valuable because otherwise it gets too complicated, and the cultural institutions, all cultural institutions manage to do is submitting reports, and they don't have enough time for their main work, which is working with heritage and collections. As I've said before, all of this data is published openly on our platform. This is one more medal that you can see, distinction that we received for the previous research, which we carried out in 2019 from the auditing chamber of the Russian Federation. For us, it is not just about the numbers. Our position is much closer to what Ivan said. We think it's really valuable. And we don't want to be formal about it. We are trying to take into account the needs of those who are going to use this data. So we want to make it user-friendly. In many regards, our platform provides even more data than initially required. So we go beyond the basic requirements. The next slide. Here are the tools that we offer. Feedback forms, program interface, user-friendliness, subscribing for new information. By the way, you can log in with one and the same information and see all the relevant data, for example, find information on lectures or events under this or that tag or under this or that topic. So it's not formal, actually. It's not too formal. You can find all the relevant information in a very user-friendly format. Relevance of data is a tag word which I think we have already used today, and that's true that data has to be updated. Some of the materials published online were updated most recently in 2016. It means they're not relevant anymore. We try to make it as relevant as possible. For example, when a film is released, we update that information, or rather, the code of our platform that is responsible for that update does that automatically. So by doing so, we tried to get rid of the human factor, to get it out of the way, because we want to avoid human mistakes that often occur in the process of copy-pasting information. The next slide, please. popular open data sets. These are just 4 of the popular data sets available on our platform. As I've already said, this is information from the Unified State Register of Cultural Heritage Objects, State Catalog of the Museum Fund of the Russian Federation. I wanted to respond to the example Ivan made. We created a catalog enabling the search option on the website of the State Library, National Library. Now this search can work not only for the archive of the library, but also you can search through the funds of museums. And it did not cause any inconvenience at all for museums. We just made data coherent, and now the search is extremely user-friendly. You can go on the website of the National Library, and if you look for, say, painter Evazovsky, then in the search entries, you will see all relevant information from museum funds, from archives of the library. The next slide, please. That's it. I removed the slide about cinema because this is a conference in the museum sector, but I just wanted to say a couple of words about our openness. We support film industry, and we gather data on budgets of films, how they were supported by the state, on the money they make. We think it's extremely important for this data to be open. I'm not sure if it's the right thing to boast about our research, but in the latest ranking of the resources with open data.
Круто. Спасибо большое, Вадим. Но вот я хочу сказать, что если смотреть на то, о чем сейчас говорил Иван, и вы взглядом не профессионального специалиста в информации, а просто простого музейщика, вот каковым я являюсь, например, то давайте посмотрим, что вы говорили вот о данных, отчетах и прочее, и это немножко с точки зрения такой вот государственной статистики и так далее, то есть то, что не надо писать очередной отчет и в очередной раз его посылать, это спасибо большое, это очень важно. Но все-таки вопрос, кто потребитель этих открытых данных. Иван приводил больше примеров, когда эти данные ориентированы на простого пользователя, который сидит у себя дома перед компьютером и интересуется какими-то культурными вещами, да? И в этом
search for the information they're interested in. I'm not sure if it's politically correct to disclose that information which is not public yet, but I will say it's then in this manner. Now, with one of the big film institutions, we're discussing that using the card of film, maybe the users will be able not just to order a taxi even, because this is a service of taxes and of very different things, but also to scan through the funds of museums. The idea is, by the way, that are born inside of the governmental bodies. Mostly this data which is produced by them is not interesting, so this is statistics which may not be that relevant for the common user, and it's extremely difficult to translate them into something interesting for everyone. So our position was generating this data. So we do generate the data first to open it later on. And a good example of that is announcing cultural events. Nobody makes the Ministry of Culture gather this data and publish it, but we just thought that in the era of digital transformation, the catchword, which is very often mentioned nowadays, we decided that in this era of digital transformation and contemporary technologies, to to complete two tasks at once: gather information from museums, spread this information among general public, and
Три в одном,
indirectly
да,
get
это
the
очень удобно, три в
statistics.
одном, да. Ну вот
Yes,
еще
3 in
одна вещь,
1.
которую вы знаете, что я тоже, ну, не
There's
то что
another
озабочена
thing,
ей,
and you know
но
that I'm
беспокоюсь об этом.
interested in
Это
this,
та
and
составляющая, о которой
I
говорил
think
Иван, это
about it.
составляющая
It is
вовлечение людей
the point that
в
Ivan
дополнение,
has talked about. It is
использование,
people
разметку и так
engagement
далее данных. Ну вот
in
я не увожу вас в
edition, in
большой разговор,
submitting
например,
data.
про
Well,
госкаталог,
we
который
will not
мог бы,
start a long discussion
но
about
я
the
знаю, что
different
в этом
catalogs,
отношении
and I know that
какие-то движения
there
происходят.
are
Но
some
я вот хочу
developments
спросить,
in this sphere,
сейчас
but I would like to
мы
ask,
перейдем очень
and
скоро
we will continue with
к грамотности и компетенциям, и как они
the
связаны с
literacy
открытыми данными,
and
но все-таки
the skills
чуть-чуть
and
хочу
how
обратиться
they
к
are
участникам
connected
дискуссии.
to open
Вот,
data. But I would
собственно,
like to
степень
address
открытости
to
российских музеев
our
и что в
panelists
отношении, с
what
каким мы можем
about the
обратиться
degree of
к
openness of Russian
рядовым
museums
сотрудникам
and
музея
what we can
месседжем. Вот
say
что,
to
открывайте
common
данные,
museums
все
employees?
данные
What
хороши
will be the message?
или
Open your
что мы,
data. All the
как бы,
data
какова
is
наша
good,
идея,
or
какова
what?
наша цель.
Well, what
Про
is our
государственные
idea? What is
отчеты
our
мы
goal?
понимаем.
We understand about
Или нам
governmental
нужно создавать какие-то
reports. It is
стандарты, или
okay.
нам нужно
Or we
создавать
should
какие-то
create the
платформы,
special standards
или они
or
уже
platforms,
существуют. И
or
будут ли
they
к
exist
госкаталогу,
already,
например, присоединяться
and
частные музеи, скажем,
maybe
если они
private
хотят?
museums
Будем ли
will
мы,
also
условно говоря,
join this
госкаталог использовать
governmental or
как такую
public catalog. Will
платформу
we use this public
вот
catalog
для, например,
as a
как
platform
Меропиано?
um,
Это, собственно,
for all the
вопрос и
museums as
к
Europeana?
Ивану, и к
It is
Владимиру,
the
и к
question
Алексею,
to
и
Ivan, Vladimir, Alexei,
ко всем.
and well,
Да.
to all the panelists. I will try to answer. I think that the main advantage, and unfortunately, I haven't said that I also represent the Accounts Chamber of Russia. I try not to mention it for people not to be afraid, but according to our estimations, the Ministry of Culture is the leader in the sphere of open data. And well, I think that if we choose the solution made by the Ministry of Culture, it will be good. And the main advantage is the fact that what our colleagues from the ministry have done, and if we want to create a Russian Europeana, if we talk about such consortiums like Yandex or Mail, etc., and if we want to unite all the resources in one platform, Ministry of Culture can do it. And afterwards, it will be a question of budgetary funds. But the idea of making it on the platform of the Ministry of Culture, it is great. And there are a lot of public, a lot of society projects also based on the Ministry of Culture platform. Sometimes they do not mention them, but we had a case when we wanted to create an API, but afterwards we received hundreds of
Хорошо,
letters
есть ли примеры
from the
такие, или,
users
может быть,
because
Вадим,
maybe the
или
users were
кто-то
not
еще скажет? Я
warned
опять
about
с точки
the
зрения
fact that the data will be
простого
open.
музейного работника
But
или
from the point of
пользователя,
view of a
посетителя, может
common
быть, и онлайн.
museum employee or a museum visitor, what can you say? Tekla, I can say that for the public catalog, and we understand the necessity of its transformation, and we know that we should make it more comfortable. But even in its existing form, there are quite a lot of research, quite a lot of visits and messages. And this openness allowed to scientists and researchers to work with it. Mainly, mass visitors need only key collections, and we understand it. For example, the Pushkin Museum, etc. Because even if they published everything on their site, on their website, not so many people will visit their website because we need to have animated tools. Because even if we have 200 or 300 points in one collection, it will aim professionals. in most of cases. And for example, we can say, well, give us all that you have, great, there will be hundreds of thousands of coins and a lot of other objects. It's great, but we need to represent key elements which represent the development of culture.
Кто-то еще хочет сказать что-то, или мы...
Are there any other comments? Yeah, I would like to add that everything which was made by the Minister of Culture was very interesting for regional governments. They have tourist portals and special cultural projects. And so they take a lot of information from the website of the Ministry of Culture and from other projects of the Ministry of Culture. I think that it is one of our public projects which is visited quite often by our citizens, because yes, it is true that there are some other websites like Gosuslugi, public services, which is very often visited by our citizens, but it is a different thing, and this project is really very interesting for all the citizens, and it is very actively used. I think that if we can do it, if we can calculate the uses of the system of the Ministry of Culture, it would be great, and it could be a small research, a small survey. The information that we have in open data shows that we have dozens of thousands of views and downloads, and even my students visit this resource and download information from this site to make their own projects. Each time when you need to see if it is a real fact, you can go to this platform and not to analyze other resources which could be false. Okay, great. Fekla, I would like to add a couple of words. I understand that our discussion is already quite long, but first of all, as for the number of visitors, Ivan is right, because we augmented the number of visitors during recent months, and now we have practically 7 million visitors by month. I will not talk about the COVID pandemic now, but from the point of view of analysis and the use of our statistics for the number of visitors, we are now doing something very interesting. We have created a digital cultural countdown, a calculator, and it is now on different websites, and it will help us to understand who visits cultural websites, and are there some crossings, or are there some similar people which visit different websites. This information is very interesting and very topical for us. Well, it is clear that there will be no personification, but we will be able to play with this data, and maybe we will create a useful service or a useful tool for our museums. Because, you know, in the museum sector, our competitors are not really competitors, but our helpers.
Вот это тот разговор, который вчера начался на большом вашем круглом столе, о том, что надо, Владимир говорил о том, что нужно обмениваться сведениями об аудитории и считать не просто количество приходов в музей или на сайт, а и понимать там это.
Yes, we need to join all data. And we were talking in the previous session, I quitted not so long ago, about online shops and also about selling of online catalogs. So, for example, if there are pictures of similar authors and, for example, the Tretyakov Gallery catalog can promote the sales of souvenirs and so on. So it will help the whole sector.
Это очень хорошая история, только как будем выдачу давать? Я хочу повыше встать в Третьяковской галерее.
How can we calculate it? Well, if you have a catalog of Repin, for example, you can look at all the other products of other museums, which also have pieces of art made
Да,
by
ну вот
Repin, for
смотрите, то
example,
есть на самом
or
деле мы говорим сейчас
otherwise.
о
Well, we are
том,
speaking now
что вот
about
Департамент
the
информационных
fact
ресурсов
that
очень
the
много и важных
Information
вещей делает
Resources
в отношении
Department is making a
открытости
lot
данных
of
и так далее.
important
Теперь,
things
если спуститься
related
на
to open
уровень
data.
музейных
But
сотрудников и
now, if
конкретных
we
музеев, то что
talk
мы
about the level
ждем
of
от них?
common
Считается
museum
ли, и это и
employees,
вопросы и
what
психологические, и
can we
вопрос
do? What
принуждения,
can they
потому что
do?
в
Is it
Воскотолов
a
все сдают
psychological
данные, потому
question?
что это необходимо, да, и совсем не
So is it
всегда
a
с
question
удовольствием
of
ставят
imposing
галочку
something? Because
опубликовать, открыть и
not
прочее,
always
прочее.
museum
Всегда
employees
ли открытость хороша? Как
open
измерять
their
степень
data. Is
открытости
openness
музеев?
always
Это мы
good?
уже сейчас,
And
вы
to what
ответите на этот
degree?
вопрос, и мы к Сергею перейдем
Well,
к
I would like to ask you
медиаграмотности. Да.
to answer this question, and we will proceed with the following presentation. Tekla, I think that we need to talk not only about the catalogs publishing, because open data about events, it is also important. And for museum employees, the most important thing is data exchange and experience exchange. Now, the degree of a digital openness of a cultural institution, if we do not talk about theaters and cinemas, if we talk about museums and libraries, so the degree of their digital openness is practically zero in comparison to universities, etc. If you ask a professor, lecturer, you won't find any information about him on the website, and it means that there will be no links with the international community. So for a university, it is not possible to imagine that their lecturers do not publish their articles or reports, but in the museum sector, it is quite common. I'm talking about the promotion of the expert level of a cultural institution, and we always start from academic circles. For example, in foreign countries, they can read an article written by a Russian lecturer, and afterwards they say that this university is a quality one, etc. And the reputation is made. But in our sector, this degree of digital openness is quite, is really not so considerable. If you allow me, I would like to create a bridge from digital openness to digital literacy. Yeah, thank you. Well, we thought, and we saw in reality that it was great. You know, before all the museums said that your database is not functioning, but we have great descriptions, great texts. But when we made this tool open and accessible, we saw who has what texts and what collections. So we can move from digital openness to digital literacy, and we see what is the quality of photos, what is the quality of descriptions. I understand that the charge and the volume of work is very important, but sometimes people make just horrible things, because if you know how to use a camera, you know how to use light, etc., you can make great pictures. The same thing for the description of several events. We see if people can sell, in a good sense of this word, sell what they are doing. Because it is very important to talk about what you are doing and why visitors should come to your exhibition or to your museum or to
во-первых, я
your
волнуюсь, что мы
event.
Сергею никак не дадим слова.
Well,
Во-вторых, это
unfortunately,
дополнительная
Sergey
история. Вы
hasn't
говорите про
spoken
продвижение,
before.
а мы
And
все-таки пытаемся
second
понять про
point,
открытость
you are
данных.
talking about promotion, but we were talking about the digital openness. Data openness is related to the level of
Цифровых или не только?
experts and the level of
Цифровых
competences.
компетенций или не
Digital
только?
competences are not only.
I mean digital competences, not only
Если ты
just the
знаешь, если ты
professional
какой-то специалист,
competences,
с
all
удовольствием
of them.
Да.
Professor Filanovich said it yesterday. We have to understand what contemporary competences are, and it should be demonstrated in the work. While some people, some professionals, are not capable of doing some things. So I think openness is all about that. It's all about authenticity, professionalism, and so on and so forth. So here, media literacy would be the ability to demonstrate your skills. And it's not
Понятно.
about the naked king. It's not a bubble.
Спасибо, Володь, большое. Мне хочется немедленно Сергею
Thank you very
передать
much,
слово. И
Vladimir.
простите,
I want to
Сергей,
pass
что
the mic to
мы
Sergey.
такой
Sergey,
живым
I'm
разговором
extremely
съели у вас
sorry
очень много
that we've been
времени.
busy
И,
talking
может быть, я
and still a
попрошу
lot of your
вас вот в
time.
контексте
So
нашей
maybe in
беседы,
the
хотят ли
context
люди
of our
открываться,
discussion,
считают ли
you
они
could
нужным открываться, считают ли они
explain whether
открытость частью
people
вообще
want to be
цифровой
open and
культуры.
whether they
Вот с
think
этой точки
openness should be
зрения
part
взглянуть на
of
результаты
digital
исследования,
literacy. Maybe
может
this
быть,
could be the lens through
намного более
which we
сокращенно,
could
чем вы
see your
изначально
research.
планировали.
Could
Еще
you
раз
please
прошу
keep it
прощения. Но есть
shorter than planned?
для всех,
Extremely
кто
sorry once
интересуется,
again
есть
that we
днем сегодня
don't have enough time for
блестящая
that.
огромная
But
презентация Сергея
for
всего
those
проекта.
interested, Sergey also today has already made a big presentation of the whole project. Yes, Folklore. The statistics are still the same. I don't want to repeat myself. But here I want to share different observations. The next slide, please. Yes, that is absolutely true. We did not research openness separately, but it is one of the issues that is part of almost every question of the questionnaire. And I'm completely on the same page with my colleagues. If your digital competences are high, then you can choose whether to be open or closed. And we all know, not only from museum sector, but from all other sectors, there are completely closed institutions with a really high level of digital competences. But if one strives for openness, one strives to be relevant and contemporary, they have to be open. Like, if you want to be open, you must have a good digital catalog, but you don't have to have it if you don't want to be open. One more important point, which I wanted to highlight, related to the same thing, when we speak about competences, about innovations in the digital sector, and not only in the digital, we find ourselves in the range of threats and challenges. So as soon as we start to open actively and to use all of these tools and all of these opportunities, then we face the challenge of staying safe. In the framework of the RENIPA research, a different research where we researched digital literacy of all the population, we started in 2015. The balance was leaning to the opportunities side, but when we returned to this research 3 years later in 2018, the level of digital literacy actually fell back because people realized they needed more safety, they were lacking safety. And in this regard, the museum community, as we see it from research, is very sensitive. So there is an absolute consensus that digital competences matter, digital technologies have to be used, and they need to be implemented, and there is a vision of how valuable it is, but at the same time, digital technologies cannot pose a threat to the main function of museums, and that is preserving cultural heritage. As for digital competences per se, we measured 17 of them, and you can see them on this slide. here we compare the blue line, all Russians 18+, the red line, employed Russian citizens, and the green line are museum employees. And you can see that museum employees score higher.
Но вы об этом говорили сегодня, что это связано с тем, что цифровая съемка воспринимается как профессиональная работа, и поэтому
digital competencies are part of the professional skills, right? Yes, it's not surprising.
Сергей, мне неловко, но у нас 3 минуты в прямом смысле слова.
Sorry, but we have just 3 minutes left, literally. Yeah. So we can see that among museum professionals, there are no people who are lacking completely digital competences. So people who score low on digital competences are from different groups of employees, from different professional communities, not from museums. Digital systems are in place in museums, in many museums, and it's a certain foundation for digital openness, for building access to information. You can see here that as for the systems, there are 3.7 systems per user, and that means that museums are well equipped. Here we see the most popular digital systems. The first one is museum's website, but the satisfaction is quite low with this resource. Like every museum has a website, but they're unhappy with its quality. 3.6 is the average score. The next slide, please. And a few words about the museum employees and how smoothly they made this transition to online. I would say that it went quite smoothly. There were some individual limitations. There are some professional limitations too, because of course museums work with material heritage. So many of the professionals cannot work remotely or cannot carry out 100% of their tasks remotely, but still mostly people are positive about it. And for most of the people, it was not difficult at all to make this transition. And there is a huge number of tools used for communication. The most actively used app is WhatsApp. 87% of the museum professionals use it. That's a lot. Facebook Messenger 45, Viber 44, Zoom 25% of all the respondents. So that means that a lot of people, a huge percentage of the professional communities uses all of these tools. This is it. Thank you for your attention.
Спасибо большое, Сергей, из-за краткости понимания. Я хочу Алексею Тихонову дать слово, потому что у нас, может быть, 2 минутки еще есть, а мы вас так и не услышали, Алексей.
We have around 2 minutes left, and we haven't heard from you. Yeah, well, I have not planned to deliver any presentation here. I could just share my personal opinion, and I would comment on what Vladimir said. Openness of collections. That is a preliminary stage for making the collection open for the end users, but it's not enough. It became evident for us that now when we publish projects, it's not enough just to digitize your collection. So if it's a web project, it has to be different, not just a number of exhibits, not just the digital images. It has to be open for maybe data. It can be the raw material for some other pieces of research.
Но мы говорим о двух разных этапах, правда? Мы говорим о данных, открытости, а потом об упаковке. И, собственно, об этом тоже говорил Володя, что конечному пользователю 300 экспонатов нужно. Но это не значит, что надо 300 открыть, правда? Считаете ли вы, что ситуация с цифровой валютой последние 3 месяца, она русских музейщиков, российских музейщиков большей открытости как-то подтолкнет?
to become more open. Yes, I think it has pushed the museums, and maybe even too strongly for that matter. Museums all have launched different projects online. And I must say that the average level of online project has dropped, because for many museums, it's the first initiative. And since they have to do at least something, they are striving now to survive, they're striving to keep their presence. But there are both advantages and disadvantages in that. The future will tell how it will go. But on the other hand, some of the online projects, which were somewhere on the shelf and people did not have time for them, are now being implemented. Vladimir, you wanted to add something, right? Yeah, I just wanted to say that actually our Digital Development Council moved to data openness, digital openness later, after covering the topic of digital accessibility, because we think it is extremely important to make it as accessible as possible for all groups of citizens in all languages. So now we are striving for complete accessibility, making it as accessible as possible. I would say that it is crucial. The accessibility of the materials, I mean, the storytelling, the presentation, how they're packed, so to speak, how they're presented, that's the real need of the audiences. Their verbal request is, please show us something. And the academic professionals mean, well, show you something. What do you mean? Show you all the collections? But it turned out that people need great stories. They don't need many objects. They need great stories. Like when they listen to a museum guide.
Есть еще пример, о котором говорил Иван, который находится на стыке этих двух вещей. Это когда люди сами участвуют в обработке материала, в создании материала. И это замечательное сочетание какой-то исследовательской работы и вовлеченности. И я вынуждена заканчивать наш разговор. Может быть, он получился немножко комканным, наверное, по моей вине. В том числе осталось очень много вопросов от аудитории, на которые мы не можем ответить, но призываем вас присылать их на почту Совета по цифровому развитию ИКОМ России. На сайте ИКОМ есть эта почта. Мне кажется, что эту дискуссию надо было бы продолжить. Я благодарю всех участников и хорошей нам дальше работы в рамках интермузея. Спасибо площадке музейного гида. Спасибо. Всего доброго. Благодарю вас.